Hi, I'm Matthew Herzberg, and this is the Myopia Mindset. This podcast is your weekly shot in the arm for motivation, inspiration, and education on your path towards success with myopia management. And my guest for this episode, a regular on the podcast, over 40 plus years of experience doing myopia management. I grew up in his practice, a pioneer ortho-K practice, Dr. Cary Herzberg. Welcome back to the Myopia Mindset.
Well, thanks, Matt. It's good to be here.
Yeah, and the whole topic of this episode is going to be about Sydnexis, the Sid 101.
Right.
I don't know what to call this FDA debacle. It's been in the news again recently. We covered this before about how it was rejected. The FDA rejected the authorization for FDA approval back in October of 2025, and the Sydnexis Sydnexis has released like a statement. There's been some new data. There's been a couple of kind of scathing articles written. One in the Washington Post, and also Inside Health Policy. So I want to go over these, Carrie, because I think that they kind of shed light on a larger part of the dynamic. Because you and I were asking this question before: how did this happen? How did Sydnexis and Sid 101, how did this FDA approval get rejected? And what happened? So I'm
Right.
hoping we can kind of explore this, kind of be more of an off the cuff kind of style episode. I've got the articles in front of me. I've made extensive notes based on what I think is interesting in these articles. Before we get started, though, so a little bit of housekeeping. Carrie, if anybody has any questions for you about anything we talk about in this episode, how can they get in touch with you online?
Yeah, it's by email, oaadoc@gmail.
All right.
The best way.
And the myopia mindset is 100% audience supported. So if this episode is valuable to you, if you believe in myopia management, if you think it's the greatest thing ever, just like we do, please consider becoming a subscriber. You can do so on our Substack, myopiamindset.substack.com. We do a weekly article, a weekly podcast, and we're going to be launching a brand new kind of myopia Q&A series where Carrie and I are going to do like a monthly devoted episode just to our subscribers' questions. So if you've ever had very specific questions or interests in myopia management, I've got one of the all-time greats here, a guru, an expert, one of the pioneers of our industry. Let's put him to work for you. Become a subscriber. That's just our way of saying thank you for supporting the myopia mindset. Myopiamindset.substack.com is how you do so. Okay, Carrie, um, I want to start with the just the I want to start with the rejection itself by the FDA because the question that we were asking initially was how did this happen? Because I think as a layman myself, because you're an optometrist, I grew up in your practice. I guess I would be considered a myopia coordinator at that point. Uh, but to a layperson, we kind of believe that the FDA has the best intentions and they know what they're doing. And if they rejected something like this, there probably was a really good reason for it. But as more time has passed, I'm failing to see what those good reasons are. So I'm hoping we can kind of start there.
Yeah.
The, what do you think?
Well, I think first off, we need to define what are talking about with the FDA here. There's two different divisions we're talking about. One is the device division, and the other one's the drug division.
Right.
And it's the drug division where we have a problem with. The device division, I mean, I remember going back to Silver Springs in 2005 and meeting with the FDA. A bunch of us were invited to attend this meeting, and we were discussing how to launch a myopia control indication through the FDA with FDA approval. So they were actually facilitating this, and they brought all the leading people in the different fields there to talk about what would make sense here for the future. So the device division has continued to perform. I mean, they just approved, the Spectacle, Stellist. They continue to approve devices. It might take a little bit longer than we like. We have to wait here, and usually our colleagues in Canada or overseas are actually using this stuff for years
Hmm.
before we can get our hands on it. So there's that thing to talk about as well. That should be another podcast. But anyway,
Hmm.
what we're talking about here is the drug division, and I became aware that there hasn't been a new drug for kids, as far as eye drops and treatment for a long, long time. So this was the first one in quite a while. And I think the thing that struck you the most was that Sydnexis met all the criteria that the FDA set in front of them, and they said, they still rejected it. They did the largest pediatric study, 800 kids
Hmm.
involved, myopia pediatric study ever. The STAR study and the results were very acceptable. Um, and so they even had to navigate to the fact that the FDA wanted them, for whatever reason, to also include in the study older patients. I should say the STAR study was a 3-year study, including older patients that maybe weren't progressing as quickly in myopia as the younger ones were. So they had to
Right.
even do that. And yet they still met the threshold. I think it was like close to 50% the first year, they 50% control myopia. And by the third year, they were gaining 37%. The FDA came back to them and said, well, we don't find this meaningful. In
Hmm.
other words, they said that the kids have to continue wearing glasses. They still get myopic, so we don't think this has any meaning for us. So they completely lost the theme here, which is the fact that we're dealing with these high myopes, a condition called high myopia, and even myopia itself, which is not a safe condition, any degree of myopia, but high myopia especially, leading to all these complications that can happen, with the retinal detachments and myopic macular degeneration, glaucoma, and others, and early cataracts. So it's just a bummer for kids to have to deal with this if it's avoidable. So, uh,
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's even more than a bummer, but so if for folks who haven't been following along, SID 101 is a low dose
yeah,
atropine,
0.01%.
and it was submitted for FDA approval using FDA guidelines. So the FDA set the benchmarks that needed to be met and the study criteria. And according to these two articles, according to information elsewhere on the internet, Sydnexis was able to meet those benchmarks. And the reason why I say it's more than just a bummer for kids, let's talk about what low dose atropine essentially means. Like an FDA, if
Right,
if we could get an FDA approved low dose atropine, what would that mean? Because I think you never know who's going to listen to the podcast, right? We're preaching to
right.
the choir with other docs like you who are interested or already doing myopia management. And so I think the point we need to hammer home is something that I keep saying over and over again is that myopia management itself has so many weird obstacles and barriers to not only entry but to progression. You've got treatments like orthokeratology, for instance, that is not out of the box easy for a lot of optometrists to get
Hmm.
into. We have docs tell us who come out of optometry school, they don't get a lot of training in myopia management if they get any. And
It's not on the testing, the
and it
test
does
to the
the
boards.
myopia management model doesn't fit exactly into what we consider like a modern practice under the insurance models and practice network models and corporate optometry and whatnot. In the past, myopia management has been the domain of private practice. And low-dose atropine is essentially like a potential easy button. It has the potential because the barrier to entries are so low for low-dose atropine that it has the potential to take a huge portion of optometrists who are kind of on the sidelines for myopia management for whatever reason. And it instantly puts a solution right into their hands for them to use and start treating this problem, which we hear over and over and over
Oh, yeah,
again.
it's the first line of defense.
Yeah.
And, with that we can treat younger kids. You can't put younger kids, 2 and 3 year old. You can't put them even preschool is hard. Can't put them in glasses. Certainly contact lenses aren't, you can do behavioral things. But the low-dose atropine is the first line of defense against this. And when you consider the fact that the greatest amount of axial length change happens before the kids become nearsighted. So
Hmm.
within about a year to year and a half before the onset of myopia, you have the greatest axial length change, which can be very significant. And this can be avoided, I mean, by early treatment. I mean, obviously we're in a race here and we're losing if we continue being a reactive society, to reacting to things instead of being proactive and treat before the problem. If you have a kid with a history, and other things that are lining up, you treat them early. And I know this is, a little bit, this is preventive care, really. But it's something that we need to install in here because why should we even permit any myopia at all if we can? I mean, we should do everything we can to avoid this for our youngsters. And so having this tool as an FDA approved tool is huge because it allows us then to go, if you're talking to a parent with an asymptomatic child, they're farsighted even, and you want to treat this kid that's been when they're farsighted. I mean, the argument's a lot easier to do if you have an FDA controlled device for that. So it's really tough. And the other point about it is that we have to have this, compounding pharmacies do it right now, which is expensive for the parents and it's also inaccurate. So, here you have SID 101, which is it's a very, very stable solution, lasts a long period of time, delivers that 0.01% effect on atropine, and has a great track record. The study that was done that they've done on fast responders with SID 101 is, and I don't know if the listeners are aware of this, but the LAMP study, which is really our reference point for low dose atropine, that's how you rate when the most effective for 0.05 to 0.025 to 0.01. That was all done on fast responders, and SID 101 was shown to be 75% effective against fast responders. These are the kids that are going to be changing. These are the kids that need that early, dosage. And the good news is there's no, the side effects are non-existent with point oh 0.01, and it has a benefit. It has a huge
Hmm.
benefit. So having the FDA, getting back to the central point you asked me, having the FDA decline to approve this is a huge step back for the industry. It's it's
Yeah.
it's something that it's like shooting yourself in the foot, kind of.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean,
so
like we've heard it all before. It's quoted in both of these articles in the Washington Post and the IHP article as well. 40% of Americans have myopia today. This is nearly double the rate from about 30 years ago. And of course, we all have heard the statistics. It's projected by the World Health Organization that over half of the world's population will be nearsighted by the year 2050. And
hmm
a big problem with this is a lot of people, we've talked about it before, don't understand why this is as important as it is. Because they're like, so what? So what if people need glasses? Like, what's the big deal?
yeah.
Nearsightedness. There, you've had some people who have been like, I've been wearing glasses my whole life. So what's the big deal? And I think what I love about I love both of the pieces that we're talking about, but particular in the Inside Health Policy article, which I should say is by Jessica Cairns. There's this lead about it from Dr. Aaron Miller, who's in Texas, who's this ophthalmologist diagnosing a 6-year-old with myopia. And he's explaining the lifetime risks of myopia to the child's mom, who, according to the article, is in her 20s. And then mid conversation, he realizes that the mom has untreated myopia, which has already caused retinal detachment in both of her eyes.
hmm
And it's like I wish I had known this doing all these conversations I've had with like people who are not in our industry, but quite frankly, even other ECPs who are in our industry about like what's the big deal? Myopia is, so what? I got to wear glasses. Who cares? It's like I think that perfectly illustrates like the dire need to have as many tools available as we can get in order to deal with this problem.
Well,
Eh,
it's like you're being myopic, and there's the instance of myopia with two parents being myopic is like 94% chance the child's going to be
mhm,
nearsighted. Those are the kinds of odds I'm talking about. It isn't. I mean, if we have knowledge of how to do things and we can do things better than we've done in the past, God help us. I hope this continues to be a success story like that. Then we need to implement those things we have. We need to do something. I mean, this is another human being. We're taught to do no harm. Well, you're doing harm if you don't treat because
mhm,
you're allowing this patient to get nearsight potentially to be this retinal detachment patient. God forbid, but it can happen. So, I mean, why put the child through that? And the other thing is that our healthcare system can't even afford this. We can't afford to watch these people get, just passively watch these people get more and more nearsighted and then have to deal with this later on. It's a tremendous cost to the patient, to society, you across the board. I mean, you
mhm,
look at the time lost to productivity, lost to work by patients who have suffered from these conditions. I mean, it's huge, and the cost of treating them is huge. So, at any level, this is
mhm,
unacceptable, on any level. So we need to be smarter than that. We were given brains for a reason, and we need to act with that. And so having the FDA, do this is kind of like again, it's just like shooting yourself in the foot kind of a thing. it's something that has to be dealt with. Obviously, we have to do some more education here, and you and I have talked about this in the past about the myopia, how it's, as you just went through it, myopia, how it's perceived as being just an eye,
Right.
it's a refractive condition. So it's a disease, and we have to treat it as such. And I'm all for now using SID 101 and whatever tools we have to treat early in life, before preschool, for kids who have that history that are going to, the parents are there, or other things are pointing that way. Treating those kids early. Why not?
Mhm.
If you can eliminate 75% of that early axial length change, I mean, you have a ball game here. Then you can basically you can like take a breath and say, "My goodness, we're going to avoid all that, and then we don't have to deal with it later on." We're already given a game changer. So let's
Yeah.
do it.
And their low dose atropine is not brand new. It's been around
No.
for a while and it's been used for a while, but why hasn't this already become the easy button? Why is it like so drastically important to have an FDA approved option?
Well, and it's a good question. You're dealing with you're dealing with an asymptomatic child for the most part. You don't have an eye disease yet. Okay, you're dealing with something that this is the method. This is a trust thing between parent and doctor and child. Because you're trusting that health professional to do this. But if the FDA says it's okay, it's safe to use, and it's effective, then that's a whole different ballgame. It's if you go to now, if you try to do this, you're going to deal with a compounding pharmacy that's going to be expensive for them to pick that up. You're dealing with a child that's not symptomatic. They're doing a lot of trust here with you. Okay, a lot of
Hmm.
trust. I mean, you can explain all the reasons why you're doing it, but it comes down to the doctor-patient relationship and that trust that goes there. So it's a heck of a lot easier for those doctors to do this if they've got an FDA approval behind them. And I'm sure they would, more and more likely to do this. A lot of doctors won't, and we've seen this. They just will not do this because they don't want to take that risk, or or a point of being some kind of a conflict with someone because they've taken a controversial position. It shouldn't be controversial, but it is. And so as an FDA approval would take a lot of it away. It would basically
Hmm.
say, "What, you don't really have an excuse here. Let's do this." You
Right.
know.
Yeah, and I will also echo this idea that like it's a lot easier for parents to navigate this difficult space of my child has myopia or there could be a problem or I do need to do something about it. It's a lot easier for them to navigate this if there's FDA approval.
Yes.
I,
Yes.
we've seen this in other treatments. We've seen this in other areas. Like, yes, you can prescribe things off label. That happens all the time. But parents put their trust in the FDA. I put my trust in the
Mm-hmm.
FDA, even though I know it doesn't work perfectly. And so, like, that's where I want to go to next is, you mentioned the STAR trial, right?
All right.
So let's go back over that. So, largest global pediatric myopia trial ever conducted. 847 kids ages 3 to 14 is what I have here. And they've been enrolled across the US and Europe, and it was 3 years uh, long. So, what I guess I don't understand is the FDA's outright rejection when the details of the study and the endpoints, the milestones
We're met.
Sydnexis needed to meet for its research were met. And there's been some controversy, I guess, around these particular issues. So, like, in the IHP article, it quotes, "There's a lack of substantial evidence that the drug works as labeled." The FDA acknowledged from the Washington Post that there was no safety concerns from both articles. Pre-specified efficacy endpoint was met. The FDA grounds the effect wasn't clinically meaningful because kids would still need glasses, and this comes up in
Yeah.
both the Washington Post
Right.
article and the Inside Health Policy.
I think the problem here is that they're missing the point, and unfortunately, a lot of the population does the same thing. They miss the point that any axial length changes, lead to,
Hmm.
more challenges for the retina and the eyeball integrity. And so you want to avoid these things. And if you can decrease this by 50%, you can decrease this by whatever it is, you're going to improve that patient's outcomes, because
Right.
limiting the amount of progression. And what could be easier than, just using a drop daily? You're asking a
Hmm.
parent to use a drop daily, and you're going to ensure that they're going to,
Yeah.
They're going to have some better results with this.
The FDA had asked Sydnexis to include older patients that the company
Right.
originally had not wanted to study. I saw this come up in the Inside Health Policy article. So I quickly wanted to make a note of that. What's the significance behind that?
Yeah, after you get into the teenage years, your progression slows down anyway. So you're not going to have a lot of, as much impact on an older patient. Plus, your patients are aging in the study, and that's why it's going down. The first year was like 50, close to 50%. It was 37% the third year. But there's a significant share of the study that's on older patients. They're not going to change as much. I mean, we all know this. The age group you need to reach, is like preschool up to 12 to 14 years of age. That age group is one has the greatest impact you can make to a lifetime free of this terrible thing, this disease
Hmm.
that impacts everyone. And myopia is not natural. Okay, it's induced. It's created from things that we do for ourselves that we're not do. We as a human being we're not experience our environment correctly, and we induce myopia. Okay, so
Right.
there's nothing natural about this thing. It's an unnatural process. It's a disease of the eyeball. You know, so basically what they're talking about here is that because they had to mix these older patients in the study, they reduced their effectiveness. Because the same way that there's another release that they had did, and Sid talked about the fact that Sid 101 was effective 75% control on fast progressors, which is the same
Yeah.
group that the LAMP study is based on. So I mean, it's really important. Like any study that you look at, is based on it's the results of all the patients in the study. Some of those patients do really well in the study. Other patients do even better, and there's some patients that don't do as well. Okay, you don't know that when you read the study results. You just see the average of what everybody did. So
Hmm.
it's important to understand that because that's where we doctors come in because we then can apply whatever we need to do, to make sure that those patients that don't respond as well are treated and they have really good results as well. And we can do that. That's why human beings and doctors, we interrelate with other human beings and we observe and take measurements and counsel our patients. But so the FDA automatically, by asking them to include older patients, was limiting the results,
Right.
basically. And then they call it it's not meaningful enough. Well, you made the results worse,
Like it
by your
sounds like the
inclusions.
FDA made it
Yeah,
clinically,
yeah,
yeah,
clinically less relevant.
non-meaningful. Yeah.
Less relevant. But I think underlying all this is the fact that they don't get it. I'm
Hmm.
sorry, but our drug division of the FDA does not get this. That any
Right.
kind of extension of myopia means that you've grown an eyeball, and that's just not acceptable because it can lead to, this growth that can lead to damage eventually, and you put a patient at risk for their entire life.
Yeah. Let's talk about the key secondary endpoints, specifically in kids age 3 to 12, which were the core prescribing population.
Right.
I'm pulling this from the Sydnexis press release about the data from that they uh, had at AAPOS. So, SID 101 cut myopia progression versus placebo by 47.9% at
Hmm.
12 months,
Right.
37.6% at 24 months,
Hmm.
28.0% at 36 months.
Right.
What is the significance behind that?
Yeah, you're showing basically we talked about if you have like a 50% control of myopia. Basically, that's going to eliminate about three-quarters of our high myopes. In other words, if you start early enough, you start treatment early enough, and you limit it to 50%. And so each of those percentages is indicating that treating that patient early is going to reduce the likelihood that they're going to become high myopia. And high myopia over 5 or 6 diopters is where the probabilities increase dramatically as far as eye problems occurring, like we talked about. So any kind of reduction of that is going to be very effective as far as controlling this.
Hmm.
And the fact that you can do it is simply with a drop. If it's an FDA approved drop, it will be covered under insurance mostly, or it'll be very inexpensive. And this is something patients can use, poor or rich or whatever it is. Right now with the
Hmm.
compounding pharmacies, it's very expensive. A lot of patients can't afford this, buy on a
Right.
monthly month basis. It's so and so this is going to really change the playing field for everyone. It's a simple way to address this problem
I want to go back to the fast progressors argument because this I feel like is one of the easiest cases to
Slam
make
dunk.
because like a slam dunk is the perfect way to put it. What I pulled from the Sid Nexus press release from AAPOS was in fast progressors, SID 101 cut progression by 76.3%
Hmm.
at 12 months,
Right.
65.1% at 24 months, 56.9% at 36 months. So, like, let that sink in. And the kids who progress the fastest,
Right.
this drug cut their progression by more than 76%
Right.
in the first
Year.
year.
And what we're and to take this one step further, what we're talking about here with FDA approval in the year or year and a half before myopia onset, you get, 0.55 millimeters of change, 0.55. That's a whole lot of change in an eyeball, over a short period of time, 0.55. And you can now knock 75% of that off. You take that, it's not zero point 0.5 anymore. It's a lot less than that. So
Mhm.
you're eliminating all that change that now you don't have to play catch up. This patient gets older, now when they're still going to be exposed to all the things that cause progression, including, the fact that they doing all this close work activity aren't outdoors enough. But at least you've eliminated a huge portion of that. And you're going to have, just alone, it's just like a breath of fresh air. You're going to eliminate most of this high myopia. And that's really the goal right now, is to eliminate high
Right.
myopia. And I think eventually the goal is to just eliminate myopia. Okay, period. That should be our long range plan here.
Yeah, but doesn't myopia have to be, classified as a disease,
Yes, it does.
pediatric progressive myopia? I mean, that's one
Yes.
of the reasons why ophthalmology and optometry are uniting on this cause.
Right.
There was a petition online. I did a video about it. At the time,
Mm-hmm.
it had like 1,000+
Yep.
signatures already on it. It is that what needs to happen, Carrie? Is
Mm-hmm.
my because we've said it before that this needs to happen. You've said it
Mm-hmm.
yourself. So like, how important is that?
This is an industry looking for a disease, basically, the
Hmm.
myopia management industry. I mean, you saw the changes that happened with, let's say, scleral lenses and the keratoconus diagnosis. Okay, it makes a whole lot of difference. That we need that medical connection with this to make the final connection that we
Right.
need. So, this needs to be rethought again and considered. And the problem here now, there's a dual problem here, because if you go ahead and classify this thing properly, as a disease, then you're asking us as eye care practitioners, then we're responsible. I remember in the old days when it says it's all genetics, well,
Hmm.
that took the onus off of you. You could go in and, in the old days, what they used to do is the patient's eyes got worse. They used to prescribe a higher power, and that was
Right.
it. Send them home
Right.
like a drug. Just need more drug. Well, that had to stop, and thank God that's finally stopped. Single vision lenses for kids are, they don't do that anymore, especially for progressors. You need to do something else, and we've got alternatives.
Reframing the problem. There seems to be a disconnect between this specific division of the FDA and what's happening around Sydnexis. And I think that the IHP article even um, uh, suggested or states that this is a pattern of surprise FDA rejections, which is emerging. So that means that this is not the only one, but that we're not going to go into the other ones here. So it's like we need to shine more of a light on this, right? You and I believe that if
Yeah,
Sydnexis made their endpoints, if the data is sound, and both of these things are true to the best of our ability to discern, then why has the FDA continued to have a reason to reject this authorization or approval?
I know.
Like, why is this happening? Because I want you to think about it, listener, in the context of, and nobody likes to be on the side of like big pharma or drug companies or whatever. But the simple fact of the matter is that this research, these treatments, this progress is less likely to be achieved or to happen if there is this disconnect in the FDA approval process. It could potentially hurt other treatments, not just this one, or studies, or whatever the case may be, because these are companies, it takes money and time and investment, and those things may not happen in the way that they should if there is this humongous obstacle to FDA approval that just seems to come out of nowhere and make no sense.
Right.
From my perspective, that's just my opinion. Based on what I've seen, this is my opinion of the situation. All right. Well, Carrie, thanks so much for going over this with me. I hope the audience is okay with this style of episode. You know, it's so unique, this situation. It's so fascinating to me, and it's
It's
something that we
frustrating.
both are very passionate about, each from our different places and perspective, but we align on so many things. And once again, Carrie, if anybody wants to reach out to you specifically on the internet, how can they do so?
It's OAADOC@Gmail.
Fantastic. And here's the part where I talk about supporting the podcast. Myopia Mindset is 100% audience supported. We do not have any sponsors as of this recording. That means that if you agree with what we're doing here, if you believe in our mission to spread the word about myopia management and how awesome it is so that more ECPs are doing it, so that more parents are aware of it, so that we can help address this problem because these obstacles keep coming up in myopia management. This is a growing problem that is spiraling out of control and has so many potential disasters waiting for it. And that this podcast is, and this brand, this our Substack is all about helping ECPs take the intimidation out of it, get motivated, educated, and inspired to get into the fight, to come off the sidelines and start addressing the problem and treating their patients. And if that appeals to you, myopiamindset.substack.com, become a subscriber. It's only $12 a month, which is basically the cost of a cup of coffee each and every week. And I like to say, hey, if you would buy me a cup of coffee to explore these topics, to keep you updated about what's happening in our industry, to bring on amazing guests and spread the word, then please consider becoming a paid subscriber. Myopiamindset.substack.com is how you do so. All right, Carrie, thanks again for coming on.
Oh, you're
And
welcome. My
for
pleasure.
everybody else, we will see you at the next one.